The Pieces Lie Where They Fell by Evil Humor. Edited and co-authored by Anon E. Mouse Jr. Read for you by My Name is R. Chapter 47. Smarty Pants. Smarty Pants was at a loss at what to do. The monster had appeared suddenly with the strange-looking filly before the monster threw it into the punishment chair and forced the filly named Vittle to watch the monster do its monster duties that it loved to show off to Smarty Pants when she was naughty. The monster was very angry fighting those strangers, who seemed to be close to defeating the monster, but Smarty Pants knew that was impossible. Nothing could defeat the monster. She knew that. Smarty Pants held her head in pain, as thoughts she should not have were in her head, and something was squeezing her head to get it out. Vittle was whimpering as the monster hit the 5 strangers around, and Smarty Pants was doing her best to comfort her, but the monster was too strong, and she whimpered at the cruel words the monster was saying, the loud voice hurting her ears. "You will all die now," the monster sneered, throwing back the head of the pony whose body the monster was using to hurt the other ponies. "And your precious Vittle will watch all of you die horrible, agonizing deaths, unable to save her friends." Smarty Pants froze at that word. Friends. Friends. Friends, 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 friends. Icken pie. Applejack. AC by Alrer Litabo Schnitnertilefouche. Those words. No. Icken pie apple jack by Alrer aboard Schnitnertilefouche. Pretty sure those were supposed to be fast, but I cannot pronounce those fast. Those words, they meant something. Something big. Something important. Something big, important, very big, important. Why couldn't she remember what they were? Why they were important? Why? Smarty Pants began to feel herself begin to forget. But no, she would not forget. Not forget. She would remember. She would remember. She would remember. She would remember! With a cry of pain, she began to remember life before the monster. She remembered living in the room of books below. Meeting ponies, knowing ponies, knowing ponies, knowing ponies. She knew ponies. Why couldn't she remember those ponies? She looked up at the view of the 5 facing the monster, and she saw them turn into a pink pony, orange pony, white pony, blue pony, yellow pony. She knew this scene. She lived through this before when they fought the monster and won. She knew them. She knew these ponies, and she knew them. Pinkie Pie, Applejack, Rarity Belle, Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy. With a cry of utter pain, she felt chains holding her mind back shatter, like twigs on the sun, exploding as she recalled all the time she spent with her friends, every moment ringing so sharply in her head it felt like her ears would bleed, so clearly that she would go blind, so perfectly detailed that Smarty Pants placed her hooves onto her head as the master chain, the chain that held her true self back, shattered as all of her memories screamed back into place, her body exploding with raw thaumatic might. Her body grew to towering heights, her horns spiraling far enough to scrape the sky, wings soaring out to claim the heavens as their own. Her mane was the very heart of the magic itself, blazing in lights and colors never known to exist, and never to exist again. Lifting her head, Smarty Pants died as the last of the donkey filly lie fell away, and she reclaimed her true name, saying it for the first time in 1,000 years. "I am," she said softly, before claiming the very air to proclaim her return, to to make the very fabric of reality itself take notice of this moment. All the powers were to witness her rebirth. Twilight Sparkle! Tilting her head downwards to Vittel, she unmade the chains holding her heiress without thought, the bonds of her prison falling beneath her might to actually bring forth a tiny fulcrum of truth to the fore. With a flicker of her will, she healed the Aristoteles' wounds and forced Vittel to face her. The sum of the parts are greater than the whole, Twilight Sparkle stated. Honesty without kindness to soften its words begets resentment. Kindness without generosity leads to the endless abuse of the good nature until nothing is left. Without loyalty to temper it, laughter will be seen as cruel and splinter all to the winds. Without honesty, there can be no loyalty, as lies and secrets are the only things that can kill loyalty. Without laughter to bring matters into perspective, generosity becomes a self-harming system without end. Twilight reached for their crown and placed it on Vittel's head, the starburst of magic changing colors from magenta to violet. Magic is the element that balances the others. It is the balance that provides a bridge so that honesty, kindness, laughter, generosity, and loyalty will work in harmony and bring forth the true power of the elements. Go now and save your fellow elements from the nightmare. Twilight Sparkle then leaned down her horn onto Vittel's soul and bestowed 2 boons. She gave her heir a snippet of her knowledge and powers so she could face their imprisoner within the moment. And she also gave Vittel's soul a push as to kick off her own magic abilities. Vittel did not insult either of them by asking a question. She knew what she must do, and did it, teleporting away to face the nightmare and her destiny. Twilight Sparkle was now alone for the first time in 1,000 years. She interacted with the... Twilight Sparkle was now alone, and for the first time in 1,000 years, she interacted with the mortal realm directly. Looking down, she saw her own skeleton with broken chains that were still melting, and bones engraved with countless spells, wards, runes, and the like to keep death away. But no creature, no matter how powerful or mighty they may be, not even the creators themselves, could deny death what it was due. It had many names: the Pale Pony, the Grim Reaper, the Collector of Souls, the Final Answer, the Great Equalizer, the Unbargainable Griffin, the Reclaimer of Final Breaths, the Stealer of Souls, the Defeater of Empires, the Swallower of Oceans, the Thief of Years, the Ultimate Reality, the Harvester of Souls, the Keeper of the Keys at the End of the Universe, one of the 4 Harbingers of the Apocalypse, the Terror of the Grave, the Proclaimed First and Final Soul of Creation, and so many more names lost to time itself. For most, death was an undefeatable terror, its visage capable of breaking any mortal's will, arrogant to believe them able to match its horrifying gaze of unnatural fire in its skull, glaring out of its eye sockets. Its reach was beyond the stars themselves, and was faster than any mortal alive. Its hood and scythe imprinted into all minds of where true horror came from. However, even in death there were exceptions. For those who died without sin, the young or simple-minded, death's fearsome appearance was softened, its scythe absent, and eyes' glow was dulled, and it took those to their final judgment with softness and tenderness. And there were exceptions. To those who suffered needlessly and were kept past their time, to those who had lost so much, to those who had been pushed beyond into the ground and yet kept their souls pure, death did more than simply soften its body. It took the time to bring true comfort to those unlucky but blazing righteous souls, for they were what the creators had always hoped mortals would achieve in their tenure of life. Twilight Sparkle was an exception unto herself. being the exception to the exception, and being a soul who had been part of a role and purpose, and would have been a power unto herself if fate had been allowed to go as it was intended. She had been part of harmony, and should have been magic, and during her 10 years of life, she had fulfilled her purpose, role, and duties without fail. So when death came for Twilight, Death took the appearance of a kindly old grandfather. Smiling with love and kindness, he stood protectively by her side, and took her beyond the realm of mortals and into Tartarus for her final journey. Almost all souls would be directed to Chiron the ferryman, who would take the souls to the banks of the damned, where they would go to judgment to learn of their fate. The line was endlessly long, for all were allowed to make their case to the judge of judges, to plead for leniency and mercy for their actions, true sins and doubts of deeds spoken by the soul. Only the truly innocent and the truly guilty would stay silent, assured in how they acted in life, and would be clear to the judge and give them passage to Elysium. Those found guilty of sins and continued to deny their deeds would be condemned to the tortures of Tartarus until such time as their crimes had received the proper punishment, and the soul understood the weight of their crimes. Those who had lived proper lives would go on to and enjoy their paradise that they earned. A part of giving their soul over to a purpose to become a power was that a deal was made to those who gave themselves to this highest of callings. Those who fulfilled their purpose and role saw that their duties and obligations were filled, that they did not abuse their position and mantles, were allowed to pass the judge without judgment. Even those who had the darkest of purposes and bleakest of roles, who created untold graves and slew uncountable lives, were promised paradise, and was given to them when their services were at an end. Death brought Twilight to the edge of Elysium, the guardians of paradise turning what passed for heads down at Death and Twilight. It was not often that Death brought a soul directly to the final destination, and it deserved notice. Twilight Sparkle looked into paradise, and what she saw made her legs fold. On the other side was her family and friends, all eager and overjoyed to see her once more. Her mom and dad were crying with joy, her brother and his wife-to-be standing next to them and smiling brightly, with her draconic brother/son standing tall on the white stallion's back. Behind them were people that she knew from Ponyville and Canterlot, friends she never had the chance to know, but all cheering at her arrival. And straight in front of her were her 5 best friends. Applejack was crying with joy and trying to hide the fact with her hat. Rainbow Dash was twitching with joy, acting like a hummingbird with a wide grin on her face. Rarity was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, her own grin speaking volumes. And Fluttershy was simply smiling broadly, with her pet bunny rabbit perched on her head. And of course, Pinkie Pie was bouncing faster than the eye could follow, and before anyone could process the thought, a massive banner saying, "Welcome home, Twilight," was in the air, and everyone had a party hat on their heads, with the guardians sharing looks of confusion and Death's eyes rolling up to the hat on its head. Twilight Sparkle walked close to the edge of Elysium and raised a hoof before she crossed the barrier. She looked backwards, back into the mortal realm. She thought of what Vittle and her friends were going to face, with the nightmare being a terrifying foe that managed to kill her friends, trap and torture her for 1,000 years, and did what it did to the princesses. She thought of what they could be facing, the monsters that Twilight and her friends left undefeated. She thought of all the hardships they could face and how much she could do to help and aid them. She thought of all the good she could do, and a tiny part of her screamed to turn around, reject paradise, for there was still so much to do. A tiny part of herself felt the need to be the princess of friendship she was destined to be, and help the new generation of elements. It was a tiny part of herself, and only a tiny part. The rest of her was tired from all the pain and suffering she had endured, and that she had done all that was required of her. She was due her paradise and her reward for fulfilling what had been asked of her. Without looking backwards ever again, Twilight stepped forwards and joined her friends and family, took part of the party that was prepared for her. At long last, Twilight was finally able to rest in peace. Alright, that is that chapter, yes. Alright, I'm gonna share an observation that I will freely admit is not mine. It was made by a user by the name of Copper Springs on the site this was published on that I was reading it from. All of the other observations I've made have been my own. This one, someone else thought of, and I hadn't seen it until I read their note, so I'm gonna read it to you guys. It was an insight I missed. Nightmare being a terrifying foe that managed to kill her friends, trap and torture her for 1,000 years, and did what it did to the princesses. Wait. Are you saying it did something different to the princesses? And Celestia wasn't there to greet Twilight. Is Celestia still alive somewhere? Oh no. That book that Viddle saw, with the picture. Don't tell me! And that was Copper Springs' comment. Yes, I hadn't thought that Celestia and Luna were absent. But they were. Anyway, thank you for listening. Have a pleasant time. Oh, also, I got a new microphone. Since last time I made a chapter. I think this one's quality is a little better. I'm gonna keep using this one. Thanks for listening. Goodbye, everyone.